Do you remember in the last political mess hunter video where I talked about the thief that stole our videos? Well, the stolen videos have been taken down, and I say that the thief has learnt their lesson and hopefully won't do it again. Please read the description of this video for more information. But hey, I'm definitely not gonna call them the thief anymore. I say they've learnt their lesson and hopefully they won't do it again. Without any further ado, then let me introduce myself. You may know me from my other channel, Obiwadonga Public Transport videos. The buses you see here are actually my photos. I'm that person that likes to take photos of buses in my local area, and there's a great lack of photos of the local buses in Obiwadonga, especially, and there's even a great lack of videos too. That's why I'm basically taking photos of buses in Obiwadonga. It's something I enjoy doing. I'm also that person that likes to understand what goes on. If you've noticed the high death toll in Victoria, some people may go, oh no, the coronavirus is killing everyone. Well, while everyone else panics about that, I can understand it's from the higher cases in the earlier weeks. If we see high numbers, then we can expect lots and lots of deaths. And as the second wave starts to die off, I hope we all have learnt a lesson. We are all in this together, and the hope comes from the community, and I think it's time to play this Greta Thunberg clip. I know that some people might complain to me, oh no, she's that whiner that yelped at us for doing nothing wrong. And the only reason she is yelling at us is because she is angry that we are not taking action to climate change. While it may look like she is angry on the outside, she is actually quite sad in the inside. But either way, I can tell that she is basically trying to tell us an important message. So I think I should play this Greta Thunberg clip here now. Believe me, some people may not want to listen to what she has to say.
Right now, we are desperate for any sign of hope. Well, I'm telling you, there is hope. I have seen it. But it does not come from the governments or corporations. It comes from the people. The people who have been unaware but are now starting to wake up. And once we become aware, we change.
And believe me, I have seen hope myself. Remember back in the first wave where we completely, almost eradicated the virus because of the restrictions. The restrictions have pretty much saved us and have pretty much prevented hundreds and hundreds of deaths, and the current death toll has overtaken that of the 2009 swine flu pandemic, which resulted in 191 deaths, and COVID has went past 400 deaths, and right now it's almost 4 times that of the swine flu. This virus has pretty much exposed what we take for granted, like our food and our resources. We've pretty much taken all of that for granted. I think this virus has taught us a very valuable lesson. Don't take our limited resources for granted. I also believe this virus should teach our current federal government a lesson. I find it very shameful to be an Australian, especially when you have got a federal government that only supports the interests of their corporate mates. And they piggyback on them and start up new projects that are actually quite useless. It's no use trying to start up a new coal mine or do gas exploration, especially when it comes to a virus like this. No one want, and it doesn't support as much jobs. And the reason it doesn't support that much jobs is because no one really wants to work in a coal mine. Whereas renewables support a lot more jobs compared to the fossil fuel industry. And I think I find that really silly indeed. You may know about the town of Singleton in the Hunter Valley, where it is pretty much known by their coal mines, and the coal mine actually breaks several laws. But there seems to be but the coal mining companies that's in those mines seem to be trying to find legal loopholes to get around their naughty business. Let's get my message loud and clear. It's no use trying to invest in projects that no one really wants to help you with, especially when it comes to fossil fuels. No one really wants to work in the fossil fuel industry, and the world is already moving away from coal. So what is the point of starting up a new fossil fuel business when renewables actually support a lot more jobs and are actually more cheaper and reliable than fossil fuels? You may notice my voice being quite shaky in here. I'm actually very quite nervous while recording this, but once I get used to it, my voice won't be so shaky. And if you're wondering about the Greta Thunberg clip earlier, does it feel shaky too? Believe it or not, I actually have autism, just like Greta Thunberg, except that I have had it for way longer than Greta Thunberg did. There are advantages and disadvantages of having a disability, but again, we are all human and we're all equal. I also find it quite shameful to be an Australian too, especially coming from a European background from both my parents. And we should be thinking about how we are treating people of different races. We're all the same species. I can't be any more blunt about it. And sadly, we have people who think that they're superior. And in the past, from history, what if you were black and done a small crime, then you get a harsh punishment. But if you're a white person and done a much more severe crime than the black person did, you don't get much of a punishment, or in some cases, not a punishment at all. And I think we need to change some systems and also educate people on why racism is wrong. Since this comes from the Black Lives Matter protests, some people might complain to me and say, "Oh no, the Black Lives Matter protests started the second wave." Well, it didn't. there weren't a lot of cases linked to those protests, and whoever was hosting the Black Lives Matter protests would have figured that whoever was sick would have stayed home, and whoever grew sick after or while they were at the protests would stay home and get tested for COVID. No way do I endorse hosting a protest during the middle of a pandemic, but I have some other sides to it. As long as you are doing the right thing, such as maintaining your distance and keeping up with your hygiene, then I'm sure that these protests can be endorsed. But on the bigger side, I don't really endorse these protests. Yes, I do believe this is an issue that needs to be tackled, and we should be taking action on this. There is no climate justice without racial justice. And after looking at the data, there are actually less cases of the flu because everyone was practicing their hygiene. So yeah, if you there would be a much higher chance if you had cold flu-like symptoms in certain areas, there would be a chance that you may have COVID. But hey, we have to. I'm trying not to mention the word COVID or coronavirus as much because otherwise YouTube might demonetize us. I also like to understand what the virus is actually trying to tell us. And what it's saying to me is that we are taking nature for granted, and we need to stop destroying nature, or we may suffer from more pandemics. And I'm sure and I would ask this question: what would you prefer, save the environment or suffer from more pandemics? Put something down in the comments if you prefer, for what option you would prefer. Because personally, I prefer to save the environment than suffer from other pandemics. Because I'm the weird person, I know. I see things differently to others. I see pandemics as an opportunity to actually fix and restore our environment and let the animals return to their natural habitat. And I think the reason why this pandemic started is because because we don't care about nature. And apparently it comes back to when they're studying bats in a lab. I believe that the bats must have gotten sick from the excessive pollution across the world. So yeah, that is quite interesting. When I first heard about the virus, I actually wasn't too surprised that it was. I actually wasn't too surprised that people with the fact that people were getting sick. But what I was surprised about is when there was a new strain of coronavirus. So therefore it causes everyone to panic. And what this virus tells me is that the government only sees it as an immediate threat, but it doesn't see the other major issue, climate change as a major threat too. While the virus is at, while the virus doesn't have an official cure yet, it does. Climate change has multiple cures, and I think we should be using those cures in order to prevent any further warming or other crazy weather on this planet. Some of you may have heard of this new series by Craig Castle. He's actually the same person who did War and Waste, and I believe both War and Waste and Fight for Planet A are both relevant to climate change, as the carbon in our food actually gets released into our atmosphere and is contributing to climate change. So that's why I believe both War and Waste and Fight for Planet A are both relevant to the current situation now. Unlike COVID, people don't see climate change as a major threat. And what it tells me is that climate change has lots of invisible threats. So yes, the threats are often invisible. They don't often tell you the threats because we've never thought about how we are treating our planet. I also find it sad that we don't seem to panic when we are told that climate change is actually happening now. I also found a few articles online suggesting that there could be more pandemics on the way, and they could happen in the middle of COVID. So it tells me that nature does not care about our human civilization and doesn't care about our civilized nations. Nature cares about how we're actually behaving and how we are treating it. And it cares about our response to its cries for help. And even though we have kind of developed a vaccine for COVID, but we haven't officially really done it yet, nature is still losing. And we need to actually help nature, because once we start acting on climate change, it's a win for nature and a win for us too. Because one, our win is that we get no pandemics and no weather that damages our stuff. And the win for nature is that it can breathe properly and the planet doesn't have any of its precious materials extracted from it. And I think since this COVID is a respiratory disease, I believe that we have been giving our planet the coronavirus before we did. And I think it goes to show that that Mother Nature is crying for help and we should be acting on it. But sadly, we see too many politicians not giving a damn about Mother Nature's calls for help. Instead, they just keep damaging nature. We just keep going business as usual. And I know that politicians love doing anything to go back to normal. But everything can change. Does anyone remember the feudal system, and how the Black Plague has changed the feudal system. It it's quite COVID has done pretty much the same. A lot of us, and it now tells me that sometimes school can be done from home. I think that we can prevent all those emissions from coming into our atmosphere. Well then, I hope you have enjoyed watching this video. Let me know in the comments below if you have learnt something in this video. And I hope you have enjoyed watching this political mess hunter video. We'll officially start the series in the next political mess hunter video. Thanks for watching.